Imagine a ship so magnificent, so technologically advanced, that newspapers called it unsinkable. Now imagine that same ship, only 4 days into its maiden voyage, vanishing beneath the freezing Atlantic in less than 3 hours, leaving over 1,500 people to fight for their lives in the darkness. The Titanic wasn't just a ship, it was the pride of an era, a floating palace built to showcase humanity's triumph over nature. But on the night of April 14, 1912, that confidence shattered like ice against steel. This is the story of ambition, luxury, tragedy, and the haunting chain of decisions that turned a dream voyage into one of the greatest maritime disasters in history. As we dive into this journey, we'll uncover what really happened on that calm, moonless night, why warnings went unheeded, and how a single iceberg reshaped the world's understanding of safety at sea. The Titanic was more than a vessel. It was the crowning achievement of the White Star Line, a marvel assembled by thousands of workers at Harland & Wolff in Belfast. At nearly 900 feet long, adorned with opulent first-class suites, grand staircases, lavish dining rooms, and some of the most advanced engineering of its time, it represented the era's belief that technology could conquer any challenge. When it set sail from Southampton on April 10, 1912, carrying over 2,200 passengers, wealthy elites, immigrants chasing new opportunities, families, crew members, dreamers from all walks of life, it embarked on what many believed would be a flawless voyage across the Atlantic. But beneath the glamour and celebration lay a quiet overconfidence, a belief that nothing could go wrong. As we explore the events that led to this tragedy, from the ship's bold design to the fateful decisions made on its bridge, this video will bring you inside the Titanic's final hours. Its collision, the desperate scramble for lifeboats, acts of heroism, moments of panic, and the heartbreaking silence that followed when the ocean closed over its decks. By the end, you'll understand not just how the Titanic sank, but why its story continues to capture the world's imagination more than a century later. From the moment the Titanic was conceived, it was meant to be different, not merely a ship, but a symbol. The early 1900s were a time of fierce competition between major transatlantic shipping companies, each striving to outdo the others in size, luxury, and speed. The White Star Line, eager to dominate the market, commissioned a trio of massive ships: the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Britannic. Of these, Titanic would become the most legendary. Built in the bustling Harland & Wolff shipyard in Belfast, the vessel required thousands of workers, millions of rivets, and some of the most advanced technologies of the era. As it rose from the slipway, its immense hull overshadowed everything around it. Newspapers marveled at its grand size and claimed it was designed to withstand practically any disaster. Whether or not these unsinkable claims were ever officially stated, they quickly became part of the ship's myth. Inside, Titanic was a floating city. It featured electric elevators, a heated swimming pool, Turkish baths, opulent dining areas, and ornate first-class suites that rivaled the world's finest hotels. Even second-class passengers enjoyed comforts that many people on land never experienced. Third-class travelers, often immigrants seeking a new life in America, had simpler accommodations, though still more comfortable than most ships of the time. In every way, Titanic was carefully crafted to impress. Its watertight compartments and remotely operated electric doors were hailed as engineering marvels that could, theoretically, keep the ship afloat even if multiple sections flooded. But the design also had hidden flaws. The compartments didn't extend high enough, meaning water could spill from one to the next like a staircase. Few would realize this weakness until it was too late. As Titanic boarded its passengers in Southampton on April 10, 1912, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Families clutched their tickets, first-class travelers greeted one another with polished smiles, and crew members hurried to their stations. When the ship finally pulled away from port, its massive propellers churned the water as spectators watched in awe. After brief stops in Cherbourg, France, and Queenstown, Ireland, the voyage began in earnest. The North Atlantic stretched ahead, vast, cold, and seemingly calm. Spirits were high. Passengers explored the ship's endless corridors, lounges, and decks. Children played. Couples strolled. Musicians tuned instruments for evening performances. The voyage was off to a seemingly perfect start, but beneath the elegance and excitement, the crew was aware of the challenges ahead. Titanic was heading into waters known for icebergs, especially in April. Throughout April 14th, the ship received multiple ice warnings from nearby vessels. Messages came from the Caronia, the Baltic, the America, and the Californian, each reporting dangerous ice fields directly in Titanic's path. These telegraph messages were dutifully logged, but that evening, the wireless operators, overwhelmed by the rush of personal messages from wealthy passengers, treated some warnings with less urgency than they deserved. One warning, sent just minutes before the collision, was even brushed aside with a request to keep out because it interrupted the operator's paid message traffic. This small moment of miscommunication would later become one of the many tragic details of the night. As the sun set on April 14th, the temperature dropped sharply. The sea around Titanic grew eerily still, like glass. Experienced sailors knew this calmness was dangerous. It meant waves wouldn't break against icebergs, making them almost impossible to spot. The night was moonless, and the stars glittered over the black ocean. On the bridge, the lookouts peered ahead but had no binoculars. They had been misplaced before departure. Still, Captain Edward Smith maintained Titanic's speed at around 22 knots. Whether he believed the ship was safe or simply confident in keeping to schedule, his decision to push forward through the ice field would become one of the most discussed choices in maritime history. At 11:40 p.m., lookout Frederick Fleet saw something in the distance, a dark shape looming ahead. "Iceberg, right ahead!" he shouted down the phone to the bridge. First Officer Murdoch reacted instantly, ordering the ship to turn and reverse the engines. But Titanic was massive, its enormous hull carved through the ocean too slowly to avoid collision entirely. The iceberg scraped along the starboard side, slicing open the hull in several places. Most passengers felt only a slight vibration, nothing that suggested a catastrophe. Many didn't even wake. Down below, however, the reality was far worse. Water gushed into the first 5 watertight compartments. Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, who was on board for the maiden voyage, quickly inspected the damage. His face reportedly turned pale when he realized the truth. The Titanic could stay afloat with up to 4 compartments flooded, but 5 meant doom. The ship was going to sink, not immediately, but inevitably. Above deck, the crew was slow to grasp the seriousness. Passengers were told it was just a precaution when they were asked to put on life jackets. But word spread quickly after Andrews' assessment. Captain Smith had no choice but to order the lifeboats uncovered and prepared. Yet here lay another tragic flaw. Titanic carried only 20 lifeboats, far fewer than needed for the 2,200 souls on board. Maritime regulations of the time were outdated, requiring lifeboats based on tonnage rather than capacity. Titanic actually carried more lifeboats than legally required, but not nearly enough to save everyone. Confusion mounted as the crew attempted to load the lifeboats. Most were only half full. Many passengers refused to board, believing the massive ship beneath their feet felt far safer than a tiny boat lowered into the frigid darkness. Officers enforced the women and children first rule with varying interpretations. Some allowed only women and children to board, while others permitted men if no women were waiting. As a result, many early lifeboats were lowered with dozens of empty seats that could have saved lives. While panic grew, acts of heroism and calm bravery unfolded across the decks. The ship's band began playing music to steady nerves, soft, comforting pieces that echoed through the cold night. Some passengers prayed, some searched desperately for loved ones, while others helped strangers reach safety. Crew members worked tirelessly, guiding people toward the boats and keeping order as best they could. The wireless operators continued sending distress signals even as water filled their room, reaching ships miles away, including the Carpathia, which immediately set course toward Titanic at full speed. Water crept steadily upward through the ship. In third class, families struggled to navigate complex corridors and locked gates, slowing their path to the upper decks. Meanwhile, first-class passengers, closer to the boats, had a significantly better chance of escape. The imbalance became painfully clear as minutes ticked by. As the bow sank deeper, the stern began rising out of the water at an increasing angle. Furniture slid, dishes shattered, steam erupted from the funnels. Crew members and passengers clung to railings. Around 2:05 a.m., the last lifeboat left. More than 1,500 people remained on board with no means of escape. Some jumped into the freezing water, hoping to reach a lifeboat. Others stayed on the rapidly tilting deck. Moments later, the ship's stern lifted completely out of the water. Titanic seemed to hang in the air for several seconds. Then, with a thunderous roar of twisting metal, it broke in two. The bow disappeared beneath the waves, and the stern settled momentarily before rising and plunging straight down. In less than 3 hours after striking the iceberg, Titanic was gone. For those in the water, survival was nearly impossible. The temperature was near freezing, cold enough to kill within minutes. Cries echoed across the ocean, lingering until they gradually faded into silence. Only one lifeboat returned to search for survivors, rescuing a handful of people who managed to cling to life. Meanwhile, the Carpathia was racing through dangerous ice to reach the scene. When it arrived around 4 a.m., it found only lifeboats drifting in the quiet dawn. Survivors, numb and traumatized, were pulled aboard. Some searched desperately for loved ones who never appeared. Others sat in stunned silence, watching the horizon where Titanic had vanished. By the time Carpathia reached New York, the world was already reeling from the news. The disaster triggered immediate investigations in both the United States and the United Kingdom. Testimonies from survivors, officers, engineers, and crew members revealed unsettling truths. Ignored ice warnings, inadequate lifeboats, speeding through dangerous waters, and design flaws that worsened the impact. The tragedy exposed the vulnerabilities of even the most advanced ships and highlighted the arrogance that sometimes accompanies technological progress. In the years that followed, sweeping reforms transformed maritime safety. Lifeboat capacity requirements were overhauled. Wireless operators were required to be on duty around the clock. The International Ice Patrol was established to monitor iceberg dangers. Titanic's sinking had claimed thousands of lives, but it also pushed the world toward safer oceans. Decades later, interest in the ship only grew. Explorers searched tirelessly for the wreck, which remained undiscovered until 1985, when Robert Ballard and his team finally located it more than 2 miles beneath the surface. The discovery revealed the ship broken into 2 main sections, surrounded by a vast debris field. Rusted railings, collapsed decks, scattered belongings, all preserved by the cold darkness of the deep sea. Images of the wreck brought the tragedy to life in a way no survivor account ever could. Since then, Titanic's story has been retold through documentaries, exhibits, books, and films, capturing the world's imagination generation after generation. More than a century later, the Titanic remains a